Welcome, Dolphins fans, haters, and everyone in between to your favorite show discussing the greatest franchise in sports, the Miami Dolphins. This is the PhinsPod. My name is Moose, your host, and happy weekend to all. Today, we're going to talk about the guys who are not shown much love, the guys who don't have anything expected of them, but who could really help change the fortunes of this team, the X Factors. Who are they, and exactly what skill set can they provide in 2021? We're going to talk about it, and let's dive in.
There's no question, but also think about how the Dolphins have philosophically tried to build that offense. They brought in Chan Gailey as the coordinator. What does Chan Gailey do? It's all shotgun, spread it out, quick passing game, which is what Tua was such a good fit for, which is part of the reason that they became obsessed with Tua. Now you got different coordinators. It's George Godsey and Eric Studesville taking over. You're still going to have some of the same fundamental stuff, but how they actually implement that, the style of offense that they try to play in terms of the play calling and everything else, that's going to be tweaked a little bit, and there's optimism that that's going to help Tua take a step forward.
Is it all Tua for you with the Dolphins?
It's a lot of Tua, just because I just see so many good players out there, like really, really good players, and a really good coach and veteran coordinators. Like, this is Tua. I feel like the same way I do with Daniel Jones about the Giants. There's so many good players. It's got to be you, dude.
When people talk about Miami's success in 2021, a few names pop up. Offensively, the expectation is that recent additions Will Fuller, Jaylen Waddle, and the improved offensive line is going to elevate the offense as a whole, and obviously the improved play of Tua. Defensively, people expect Jerome and Xavien Howard to be leading the charge for the defense, and yeah, that is true. We need our best players to play their best football in order to be successful as a team, but there are guys who no one is mentioning who can also be huge contributors to this football team. And their contributions will only make the lives of the Will Fullers and Jerome Bakers that much easier. So today, we're going to look at two potential X factors on the offensive side and two on defense for this upcoming season. Starting on the offensive side of the ball, and this guy is not as unknown as some of the others, but I think his potential impact is definitely flying under the radar, and that's Lynn Bowden Jr. Remember, the rookie last year was originally drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders in the 3rd round, 80th overall, so a pretty high pick for a pretty loaded draft. So you know the talent is definitely there, and we saw it. They tried to convert him to running back, though, over in Las Vegas, and that was a bad idea for all parties involved. Miami sent over a future 4th-round pick, and a deal was made. Both sides seemed happy, and Miami was able to work and develop the rookie. He played in the SEC in college for Kentucky, and he showed that he could do it all on the football field. Due to an injury at the quarterback position while he was at Kentucky, he was called in, and he had to play quarterback, and although they didn't play the traditional 5-step drop, throw it downfield, no, he was still able to keep his team competitive in the toughest conference in college football. And that just goes to show you the type of baller he is. And we saw flashes of that this season, or this past season. What makes Bowden really potent, it's his versatility, right? Line him up in the slot. We saw him as a traditional receiver, and that's where he's likely going to spend most of his time. But then we also saw him in the backfield. He can come out lined up as a running back, line him right off the tackle as a receiver, play snaps at quarterback too. We saw him in the Wildcat playing with Malcolm Perry. He's a jack of all trades, and one that George Godsey and Eric Studesville would be smart to utilize. And the reason that he's an X factor, it's simple. Down the stretch last year, when Miami was lacking playmakers in 2020, Tua turned to Bowden often. Although he only finished with 28 receptions, 211 yards, nothing too impressive, but it's important again to remember he did join the Dolphins extremely late in the process, and he needed time to catch up, and more so than normal if he was a veteran, he would just have to learn the playbook, adjust his lingo to the playbook, but he was a rookie, and it was a COVID year, so he definitely needed a little more time, and that's why we really only saw him get going deeper into the season later in the second half of the year. But once he did get going, it was exciting. And the fact that Tua trusted him so much as a rookie, I think it means he's likely going to continue to have faith in sending the ball in Bowden's direction. He needs to continue to show out in camp, obviously, now that there's a lot more competition at the position, but I don't really think that's going to be a problem for him. His skill set fits what we project this offense to be extremely well. He's quick in short spaces, explosive coming off the line of scrimmage, and he has a knack for finding the soft spots and getting open shallow. Again, I think that his experience playing quarterback really helped him when he then transitioned back to playing his natural position of receiver. And look, he's by no means like an intermediate to deep route runner. He needs to refine that skill set. He's not nearly as sharp in his routes yet, but he can definitely be used in the short pass game like last year, as well as over the middle of of the field, which we saw Tua start pushing the ball in the Chiefs game. He had that great catch over the middle, so he's definitely capable. And look, where the magic really happens with Bowden is when the ball is in his hands. He's extremely slippery, and he seemed to always make the first guy miss. And the reason I have him as an X factor is due to what he could mean for the rest of the offense. Imagine that Bowden is one of Miami's leading target getters, right? We're halfway through the year, and shockingly, Lynn Bowden is doing really well for the offense. He may have a low yards per reception, but he's proven to generally be effective in the short receiving game, and he's moving the chains on third and mediums, right? Exactly what you want from your slot guy. Well, if that's the case, then opposing defenses are going to need to be aware of him and focus on one of Tua's developing favorite targets. And then that will innately open everything else up. You got to focus. Now that the defense has to focus on him, that focus going to him means less focus going elsewhere, and that's great news for the guys on the outside, Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, and even Jaylen Waddle, right? Having Lynn Bowden succeed in this offense will mean wonders for the unit as a whole. Next up, speaking of the offensive side, we're looking in the backfield. And no, not the guys who carried the load last season. I'm talking about a fresh face, Malcolm Brown. Brown signed with the Rams as an undrafted free agent out of Texas back in 2015 and managed to hold on in the league as a running back, again, in that Rams offense too, up behind Todd Gurley, which I think says a lot about what he can provide. He was able to stay with them again until this offseason where he was a free agent, and Miami brought the 28-year-old in on a 2-year deal worth $3.5 million. In 70 games played in his career, Brown has rushed for 1,200 yards on a 4 yards per carry average, scoring 11 touchdowns. And that's really what he's good for. Touchdowns. And it's not impressive. By no means are any of those numbers impressive. He was not a starting back. That's important. He was behind Todd Gurley most of that time. So that's the reason for those low totals despite 70 games played. But he does add a dimension to this running game, the Dolphins running game, that is not present right now. Brown is the biggest back the Dolphins have. He's about 5'11", 225. And aside, of course, from the 7th-round pick, Jared Dokes, who's about the exact same size. But again, we don't know what Jared Dokes is going to look like. We still need to see him play in the NFL. Look, Myles Gaskin and Savon Ahmed are great in what they do, and there is a role for that. Frankly, the scat back probably plays a larger role in this offense, which is going to utilize receiving backs often, but sometimes the game calls for an old-school thumper, someone who can fall forward for a consistent 4 yards, someone you bring in to wear down a defense and run out the clock when you got a tight lead, a guy who can be brought in on 4th and 1 or on the goal line. And that's who Malcolm Brown can be for the Dolphins. He's had some great moments back with the Rams. His game against the Cowboys, premium stuff. I believe it was the opening Sunday Night Football game. He had a hell of a game. But I think he's going to do his best in an ensemble, not when he's the lead back, and he's not going to really ever be the lead back for the Dolphins. If he becomes what we wanted Jordan Howard to be last year, if he becomes that for this team going forward, then the Dolphins are looking far better in the running back room than many fans seem to think. And look, Malcolm Brown is not completely one-dimensional. He has pretty good hands, and he was asked to run routes for Sean McVay and the Rams. But remember, Brian Flores comes from the school of Bill, and Bill does not value running backs at all. We've seen this so far from the current regime, who's only spent draft capital in the form of 2 7th-round picks on them, Myles Gaskin, and then this year, Jared Dokes. The fact that they spent a few million on bringing Malcolm Brown in, that means they have a role for him in mind, and that role is going to be important in order for this running game to be better in 2021. And moving on to the defensive side of the ball, we're going to look at a couple of new additions. Remember at the start of free agency, when the Patriots had that scurry of free agents, like Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, one of those was Davon Godchaux. They signed away Davon Godchaux, former Dolphins 5th-round pick, and it was surprising. And it's sad to see one of our own get poached. But hey, it's nice that they're the ones taken from us now, considering we have the surplus of talent while they're the ones looking and they're coming to us for that talent. Nice. How the turntables. But in rebuttal, Miami filled the void of Davon Godchaux with former Patriot Adam Butler. And I'm going to be completely honest here, on record, write this down, save it for the season. Butler could very well be an upgrade. And considering we're paying him less than half of what New England's paying Devon. Godchow got a $16 million deal. We're paying Butler $7.5. I think this is a blessing in disguise. What Adam Butler does and why he makes this X Factor list is he can rush the passer at a pretty high level from the inside. He is a defensive tackle. He does not play on the outside, but he's built pretty skinny. He's got a lower body that's pretty thin, and it's quick. And what he misses in that upper body strength and in that size, he more than makes up for in his agility coming from the interior of the defensive line, which is hard to find. Since he signed with the Patriots as an undrafted free agent, again, also an undrafted free agent out of Vandy in 2017, Vanderbilt, he's totaled as a rookie 2 sacks, then 3 sacks, then 6 sacks, and then 4 sacks in each of his first 4 seasons. And for a defensive tackle, that's production. I mean, compare that to Godchow, who entered the league at the same time in 2017, and he's recorded 3 sacks in total. And look, I understand they're different players, and Butler is not as stout against the run as Godchow. I mean, just purely from the size, it's obvious. But I would definitely say that Adam Butler is by no means a liability when it comes to run defense. He's still a plus contributor, and he now adds a pass rush element, which is sorely lacking from the interior of the defensive line. If Adam Butler, who has familiarity with Brian Flores as well, if he can manage 5 sacks as a rotational guy, because again, Christian Wilkins, Raekwon Davis, they're most likely to be the starters, while Zach Sealer, again, has a lot of experience as well. He's going to probably be the third guy. But if Adam Butler shows out and starts climbing the depth chart, I mean, if he gets 5 sacks, again, from that position, that would help this defense immensely and really help to pour on the pressure on opposing defenses. It's coming from the middle. It's coming from the outside. You can't even throw it on this secondary. This defense would become much more shut down with the pass rush presence coming from the middle. And the last X factor we're going to talk about today on the defensive side is the guy we traded from the Houston Texans for Shaq Lawson, one Benardrick McKinney. And look, he's hardly under the radar considering he's the only current Dolphins linebacker with a Pro Bowl appearance, but I don't think many fans realize exactly how impactful he can be for this defense this year. Think about how the Dolphins played defense in 2020. Top 5, absolutely, right? But that was led by the great pass defense. Solid linebacker play, but horrid defending the run. And oftentimes, it was not on the defensive tackles. It was not completely their fault for the gaping holes that were not being filled, but rather it was the linebackers who were getting washed down, kicked out of the play by pulling guards, by tackles, tight ends. They cannot shed any blocks, and boom, there's a huge hole, and they're getting 6 yards a pop. We saw that many a time, and it was thanks to the secondary that this defense was able to play at a high level. But that's what McKinney provides, and he provides it at an extremely good rate, stopping the run. Remember, Miami did not just sign him as a free agent, they traded for him. They identified a weakness they had, and then identified an available player who fit that weakness perfectly, and then they made their move to secure him by sending Shaq Lawson. And now the 28-year-old linebacker who spent his whole career in Houston with the Texans only appeared in 4 games, obviously, last year due to a shoulder injury, which has required surgery, but Miami was again able to acquire him for something that they were likely going to move on from soon anyway. Shaq Lawson did not provide the spark we expected him to, signing him in 2019 or in the 2020 offseason. But McKinney can play the role of the traditional Mike linebacker in this defense, not the hybrid form that we see played from Baker. Expect McKinney to see plenty of reps early on early downs, 1st and 10, when running plays are expected, because again, he's a run-stopping specialist. And he's likely going to be on the field 100% of the reps in the red zone. He won't leave the field because, again, in those tight spaces, you need someone who can thump and plug holes quickly. And again, McKinney is a very high IQ player and a very sound tackler, which makes sense why Brian Flores identified him and wanted him on this defense. He loves guys who can tackle, and that is definitely something McKinney can do. And again, that high football IQ, that helps him sniff out running plays early. And it's something that if you look at the film and if you talk to Texans fans, they definitely know that McKinney's a damn good player. He's a veteran leader who can really bring some physicality and leadership to the defensive core. I loved the trade as well when it happened, and I think that if he does succeed, it's going to help this defense on all 3 levels. If he does do well, then give credit to Chris Grier for looking and identifying at that weakness and upgrading his team. now if he struggles, which is possible considering he's coming back from the shoulder injury as well as surgery, then this may look to be a bad move. But I don't really think so considering the way he does play as a physical guy. I think it's a lot easier to come back when you're, focused on just thumping versus when you're quick twitch and you're focused on cutting. That's usually when guys struggle and come back a step slow. But when your whole game was a little more just physical, stop the run, plug the hole, and didn't rely on that quickness, I don't think it's going to be as tough for him to come back. But either way, I'm intrigued to see what the former Pro Bowler can do now that he's in aqua and orange. All in all, if these guys play well for Miami, you got Lynn Bowden Jr., Malcolm Brown, Adam Butler, and Benardrick McKinney, then the Dolphins are going to have a much, much better chance of winning football games and competing in the playoffs. You're only as good as your weakness, and we need great depth pieces, right, to make sure that those weaknesses aren't glaring so that when injuries do inevitably come and those guys are asked to step up, you can still keep the machine humming. What do you guys think? Who's your X factor for this season? Let us know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube or over on social media, Twitter and Instagram @PhinsPod.
Exactly right. I think that's exactly what it is there. They got a guy like Malcolm Brown who's been around and done that. They'll be able to trust him. The Salvin Ahmed, he did a good job last year. But you're right. I don't think you're ever going to see them stuck with a big money running back there in Miami. It is the New England approach. Wait, this week we want to go outside and run outside zone more. All right, let's use our running back that's good at doing that. This week we're going to run, in between the guards and pull linemen. All right, this running back's better at doing that. This is going to be a pass game week. Yeah, I would think that's kind of the platooning they're going to do there. But I still think it's going to be an important part of their team. I have a hard time thinking Flores, defensive coach, all the assets they've put in to, it's first round, second round offensive linemen all over that offensive line there to where I would think they're going to run the ball, and it's going to be a major part of how they play overall on a week-to-week basis.
That's going to do it for us here today. Thank you guys so much for listening to the FhinsPod. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you always to Timothy Ritchie, member of the pod and supporter of the show over on Patreon. Check that out. Thank you all so much for the continued support over there. And please remember to like the video if you enjoyed the show. Subscribe just so you never miss a chance to chat about your Miami Dolphins. Remember that the FhinsPod's also available on all platforms, wherever you stream, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, and of course here on YouTube. Continue the conversation with us over on Twitter and Instagram @FhinsPod. I hope you all have an amazing day, and until next time, stay safe. Love y'all.